This program is brought to you by Emory University.
Well, summarizing your book, it's an instant bestseller, but I think where you struck the most powerful chord is discussing the need to innovate in order to compete and also to raise U.S. living standards. What are some ways you encouraged innovation and increased productivity, creating good jobs while governor?
I'm going to step back and just say that the point you made at the beginning of your question is something that I don't think most people consider. And that is that to raise the standard of living of any people, you have to increase productivity. And the term productivity means different things to different people. It's not just how hard you work and how quickly you turn things out. It's rather saying, let's look at all the people in a society and how much stuff they make, and that's the productivity of that people. That number of that stuff they make divided by the number of people gives you average productivity per person. The more stuff people make, the more they have to share amongst themselves. If you have a population that doesn't make very much, they don't have a lot of wealth. And populations that through their capital investment or through their know-how, innovation, can make a lot of things, and services, goods of all kinds, the people in that society will live out a more prosperous life. What happens, of course, is that sounds all good in theory, but in fact there arises a sentiment on the part of a lot of people not to increase productivity. And I mentioned in the book, for instance, the supposed farmer that you have a little society of 100 people, 50 people make the houses, 50 people raise all the food, and then all of a sudden somebody comes up with a tractor and says we don't need 50 people to raise food anymore. We only need 10 people to raise the food. Well, the 40 people that are out of work are not going to be happy. And so what happens in a society is that people try and resist change and innovation because it will affect them very personally. And so as a governor or a president or a senator or anybody in political office, one of the best things you do to raise productivity is to keep at bay those forces that try and stop productivity from rising. It is a constant effort. Every business that sees a competitor come up with a new idea tries to figure out how to legally or some otherwise squelch it. So when Walmart came up with a different idea in retailing, everybody tries to figure out how to close down Walmart, keep it out of their town, don't let it come in. It's a more productive way of getting goods to people. So its competitors try and stop it. So number one is keep productivity from being stymied by government. How can you actually encourage it to develop? Well, President Obama was right the other day at the Job Summit. He said that government doesn't create jobs, the private sector does. And government's job is to create the conditions that encourage private sector businesses to grow and to invest. And you have to look as your business leader to say, are you creating conditions that encourage investment, innovation, or are you not? One of the ways you encourage innovation is keeping the tax down on innovating. It's expensive in this country to innovate. You think about going to your family and friends and borrowing money to start a business, and then if you're one of the, 1 out of 10 or 1 out of 100 that succeeds, the government is going to tax you. If you're a C Corp, it's going to tax you at about 40%. And then you're going to get your dividend out after you've got much left, you're going to get taxed again at 40%. So you end up with roughly a third of the profit of the enterprise if it's successful. So high taxes on investment and innovation keep innovation from occurring. And so in our state, we worked real hard to keep taxes down. We cut taxes time and again. We tried to find ways to make it easier to start a business. I had the privilege of meeting with the chief executive of one of the large pharmaceutical companies that just built a new headquarters in our state. And I met with him one-on-one, and I expected him to say, Governor, thank you so much for welcoming me to your state. It was great doing business with you. There are those things you expect when you're sitting down with somebody who just put a lot of money in your state. And he said, I want you to know, Governor, I would never build in your state again. He said, and I think the number was 8 years it took from the time they decided to build in our state until they finally got all their permits, all their approvals from the state and from the city. Well, after I heard that story, I said, okay, we're going to go to work to see if we can't have cities and the state guarantee that within 180 days of someone coming to us with a request, we can give them all the permits that are required to start building so we can construct and grow. These are the kinds of things you try and do to encourage investment, new ideas and innovation. I'll mention one more. And that is we noted that MIT, where you have your background, MIT has an office where people that work at MIT and that go to school there, if they come up with a good idea, they can go to that office and say, I got this great idea for a business, and I don't know how to get funding for it. I don't know how to get a management team for it. And that office is specializes in writing business plans, contacting venture capitalists, working out, negotiating deals with the venture capitalists, and getting people in business, for which it takes a share of the ownership of that new business. And we noted that in our state, they were starting business after business every year. So we took that idea and expanded it to our public universities as well. We said we want each of our major universities to have one of these offices so that ideas in University of Massachusetts can be brought there. And we said to all the other private colleges and universities, take your ideas to our state office. We'll help your students and your faculty get ideas into the marketplace. These are the kinds of things we did to try and encourage innovation and productivity.
And it's working. When we talk about the 40 farmers, people sometimes focus on them. And of course in Massachusetts they're in better jobs. In one of my favorite parts of your book, you actually outshine us professors of global business, global economy. You discuss comparative advantage instead of absolute advantage, purchasing power, parity. But you articulate the gains of free trade. But one thing I appreciate is you also show, I think, a very deep and a sincere compassion for those who are going to lose their jobs in the short term. Before there's retraining programs, et cetera. And there is within the nature of capitalism the ability to create value and wealth, but also there's the creative destruction, which is how it creates value. Now, in the book, you discuss some very positive actions you took as governor, compassionate actions, to help those 40 farmers. Can you expand on ideas how the U.S. can save free trade from its critics while minimizing its adverse distributional consequences?
Yeah, I think it's important to underscore something, which is that economists and business people can acknowledge that creative destruction does enhance productivity and raise the standards of living of the people of a society. That sounds great, except creative destruction does not sound real good if it happens to you. And there are and for an economy to thrive, and as ours does, there are a lot of people who will suffer as a result of that. Losing a job, I don't know how many in the room here have lost a job. Losing a job is not just difficult financially, it's difficult psychologically. I served as a lay pastor in my church and counseled, in some cases, individuals who'd lost jobs. It was interesting to see how many had weight gain or weight loss, how many marriages faltered, faith faltered. It's a very challenging aspect of life in a society that has as much change and dynamism as our society, given its global nature, has. And therefore, I think it's important for us as a society to find ways to help people be able to move through this process of losing a job in one industry that becomes outmoded and finding a position in a new type of industry that is growing. We have to do that in a way that it does not cause financial and psychological distress. I happen to believe, everyone has their own perspective on this, but that government training programs, which is, hey, you lost your job in the steel mill, we're going to teach you how to repair computers. And you go spend a year getting subsidized education repairing computers. I don't think that does a lot of good in most cases. Sometimes, yeah, but by and large, people are getting trained for jobs that also don't exist. And it's 2 years to, you have 2 years, you don't have to worry about anything because you're going to school, but there's no job at the end of it either. And you end up, doing something altogether different. What we proposed in our state, and we're actually able to implement in a small way, was this. We said, if you'll hire someone to a company, if you'll hire anybody who's been out of work a year or more, we'll put, if you will, a $2,000 figure on their head, which means that you as the hiring company can use up to $2,000 as a credit to train that person. I like the idea of letting the company that actually has a job get money to do the training so that people are being trained for an actual job. I'd like that number to be larger. I think we had one-stop career centers where people who were out of work were able to go to a place every day. They had a computer, they had a Carol, they could look up job opportunities, they could look up training opportunities, and we could connect them with businesses that wanted to hire them for real jobs and at the same time give them the training they'd need to carry out those jobs. I think something of that nature makes an awful lot of sense on the state-by-state level, perhaps even at the federal level, but I tend to favor those ideas that work best in states. And if they're working well in the state, let other states copy them. If more funding is necessary, perhaps roll them out federally. But by and large, I think we have to recognize that in a highly dynamic society, we have to ease the path of people moving from an employed position to one where they may no longer have their employment. And by the way, that's one aspect of healthcare reform I think is a good thing, which is making sure people don't lose insurance as they lose their job or change jobs.
That's right. You have that wonderful quote in the book that I think it was Jeffersonian, that states can be the laboratory of democracy. And I think we've seen that in Massachusetts. Right, right now there's a lot of populist bashing of business people. You offer a well-reasoned defense of the need for successful business people to create wealth for all of us. Can you expound on your arguments for the benefits conferred on the U.S. by creative capitalists, at least the vast majority who are very principled?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to understand how people find it so attractive to bash executives and businesses generally, because frankly, every dollar we have to spend in government, every dollar I got to spend helping the poor, helping schools, helping seniors, was only valuable if it represented a good or service produced in the private sector. I have more and more money as a government official if the private sector is thriving and growing, if jobs are being created and people are paying taxes. And you don't help the wage earner by attacking the wage payer. So it's I think a recognition on the part of the American people, although there are some things that I think we do that lead to the resentment of people in the executive suite. I think in some cases that boards pay their executives too much. I don't favor the government stepping in and saying, you can't do this. This is a free economy. We'll let boards and shareholders decide what they're going to pay people. But I think our compensation packages are far too short-term oriented, and that in some cases the compensation packages are way out of alignment of what is necessary to attract the talent to lead the enterprise. And it breeds, when you hear about one person making a lot of money, it breeds resentment on the part of the tens of thousands of others that work in the enterprise. I don't know the best way to solve that. But usually the CEO has enormous influence over the members of the board, and it's a very cozy relationship, and you'll hire a compensation consultant that comes in and says we should pay the CEO lots more money because, look, this company we just worked for is paying their CEO a lot more money, and the numbers get to be stratospheric, and it breeds a kind of resentment that I think has led in some cases to excess on the part of those executives doing things that, at some point, if you're making $1 million a year, greed may be at this level. When you're making $10 million a year, greed's going to get a little higher, and people get out of control. And I think that's something that the people who are speaking about board governance need to think about how to have boards play a more dispassionate and detached role in selecting the compensation packages for chief executives and other senior officers. That's tough for all you, because I know you're planning on running Coca-Cola, each one of you. But although my guess is most of you are planning on starting your own business at some point, and you're less interested in what the CEO of a major public corporation is going to get, but instead, whether you'll be able to keep a tax rate low enough that you'll be able to keep what you earn.
Just in case Mrs. Goizueta is watching on the web, Dean, Governor Romney opened 3 Cokes while we were preparing. I'm not going to say if he drank any, but he opened them. And building on that idea, the American people have long admired successful business people, including your father, and admired those who got rich. Now the mood has turned sullen and resentful, believing that the game is rigged. What can business people do to restore the respect and admiration of the American people?
Boy, I wish I had a great answer for that. I'll tell you what I do. I honestly think the American people are tired of just being given simple answers, and they want the truth. And so what I do in the book is I tell people the truth, which is, are there some bad actors out there? Of course. But that most people who lead enterprises are good people who are trying to do their very best for themselves, for their employees, for their shareholders, and that this scapegoating is a highly destructive tendency. I was disappointed that in the president's effort to pass his health care bill, and I have some differences, as I'm sure you know, of opinion with regards to him on his health care bill, but one of the things that disturbed me about his campaign to pass it was that he said he focused everything on the insurance companies, And somehow these insurance companies are bad people. And I thought, gosh, in my state, the 6 big insurance companies are all not-for-profit. These are not bad people. They're doing their very best to try and provide care to individuals who need it. And to suggest that the cost of health care in America is high because of the insurance companies is a little silly. I mean, it's high for a lot of very complex reasons. We have excellent health care. We've got a lot of medical equipment. We have a lot of hospitals and doctors. We have defensive medicine. We have expensive pharmaceuticals. And yes, we have, I'm sure among all the the insurance companies we have, roughly 1,000 of them. I'm sure there's some bad actors here and there. But the scapegoating of a particular group of people has never led to a strong economy or a strong nation. The same thing happened with regards to the financial meltdown. It's been very attractive for people on both sides of the aisle to say, oh, it's all Wall Street. The greed of Wall Street caused this. If it's the greed of Wall Street's always been there. I mean, that's not something new. So you can hardly attribute what happened to our financial system as the burgeoning of greed on Wall Street. That's been there. That was part of the problem. No question about that, but only part. And if we want to avoid another meltdown like the one we just had, you've got to have a broader view of what's really occurring. So the scapegoating of chief executives or Wall Street or insurance companies is not conducive to helping people understand the truth. And I think that whenever the campaigns occur in this coming fall, that you'll have candidates that scapegoat and those that don't. Mm-hmm. And I think American people are going to increasingly listen to the truth and will be less swayed by the kind of excessive populism that suggests that we find some person to target or some narrow scapegoated group. It's a very dangerous tendency, as we know, historically. And an economy where free enterprise innovation accounts for our success as a nation, it's a very ironic and unfortunate tendency.
That's right. And when things get really bad for someone in the world, they head to Massachusetts to Mass General Hospital, or they head to Emory because we have the world's best ear person. Like you say, we're expensive, but it isn't all due to one thing. And you also talk about immigration in the book. Someone very dear to me is very ill, and this person's doctor is Irish because we attract the best doctors, and we are open to the best people. 40% of our MBA students are international. But getting deeper into healthcare, there are over 200 members in the Massachusetts legislature, and all but 2 voted for what people call Romney Care. And interestingly, you stood at Faneuil Hall in Boston in 2006 with an exemplar of the Democratic Party, the late Ted Kennedy, and the 2 of you had worked very hard to pass this. And in the book, you give Senator Kennedy credit for the best line. He said, when Mitt Romney and Ted Kennedy are celebrating the same piece of legislation, it means only one thing. One of us didn't read it. I sometimes think when someone I always disagree with and I agree with something, then an idea is probably a great idea. Or it's a terrible idea, it's never in between, But I can speak from extended family experience, a different extended family experience about people who have pre-existing conditions, don't have a job, et cetera, who live in Massachusetts, that Romney Care adds value, and it adds value to people who are truly needy. There were something like 500 to 600,000 people uninsured in Massachusetts. Now, roughly 98% of the people are insured. But could you compare, maybe contrast, the Massachusetts plan to what has emerged from the Congress and the good parts, perhaps, of the current legislation, parts that you think in the fullness of time need to be changed and improved?
Yeah. Well, let me start off by just pointing out that I like the idea, and you quoting Jefferson, that the states are laboratories of democracy. I like the idea of letting states deal with issues on their own and fashioning their programs in a way that meets the needs of their own citizens.
Sure.
And I believe that as we do so, we can find what's good and bad in different ideas people come up with, and ultimately, perhaps, the states will adopt a similar program, or perhaps even the federal government will say, let's standardize this, we'll all do it together. So I begin by saying I like what we did in Massachusetts. It's not perfect. It's an advance in my view over what we had, but I wouldn't have taken what we did in Massachusetts had I been elected president and imposed it on the whole nation. And I said that time and again during my campaign. I would instead give the incentive for states to create their own plans as we had, learning from ours. That being said, let me tell you how I looked at it from our state. You have three ways to deal with the healthcare system in our country for those that are uninsured. You have a lot of people that don't have insurance, and you can give them these options. One is to say, even though you don't have insurance, you can go to the hospital when you need emergency care or major medical treatment, heart attack, cancer, whatever. You can go to the hospital, even though you don't have insurance, and government will pay. That's one option. That's the option you have here, by the way. That's the option that most states have other than Massachusetts, which is somebody who is uninsured, who becomes violently, seriously ill, goes to the hospital, and you pay for it through taxes. Government pays. I didn't like that option. I call that the free rider option, which is I found that about half the people in our state that were doing that were making enough money to buy insurance, but they said, why buy insurance? If I get real sick, I can just go to the hospital and get free care. So, number one, we said we don't like that idea. Number two is to say, you know what? If you can afford insurance, you ought to buy insurance. And if you don't, we're going to create an incentive for you to do so. Now, the incentive we created was saying if you don't have insurance, even though you can afford it, we're going to increase your tax bill by about half the cost of the lowest priced health insurance plan available in our state. That was one way of doing it. Another way to do it, of course, would be to give everybody a check, except those that don't have insurance. Then they don't get a check, and that's the same thing, just in reverse. It's an incentive, if you will. It's called an individual mandate, but it says you have to get insurance to get that financial benefit from the tax man. The third option is to say to every employer, you must impose, or you must be given a mandate as an employer to insure all your people. The challenge with that one is you got a lot of people that are unemployed or that are sole entrepreneurs, sole workers, and so that model doesn't work for a lot of folks, and so that one didn't work. So we looked at it and said of the three, we like the one in the middle the best. We like the idea of creating an incentive for people to get insurance if they can afford it. And that's what we did, and that's what encouraged people to get insurance, and it's what allowed the insurance companies, the private insurance companies, to say, hey, now that everybody's in the pool, we can bring the premiums down. We don't have to worry about pre-existing conditions because everybody's in the pool. And we don't have to worry about people changing jobs and losing their insurance because, again, everybody's in the pool of insureds. So it works pretty well for us. Now, that sounds very similar to the president's plan, and in some respects it is. I don't know whether he looked at what we did or not, but he applied that same approach in the plan he put together. But there's some things I don't like about it. One, I don't like that it's a federal plan. I like a state approach better, because there are errors in our plan that ought to be ironed out and taken out. States could learn from one another. Number two, he raises taxes by $500 billion. He's putting a tax on capital gains, on dividends. That does not encourage investment and innovation. He's putting a tax on medical device companies, a lot of tax. That's going to raise the cost of health care in the country. I don't like that either. We didn't raise taxes, by the way. Our plan didn't cause a tax increase. Then he's cutting Medicare Advantage, $500 billion. I don't like that either. And finally, he's putting in place cost controls, price controls. He's given the federal government the authority to do a remarkable combination of things. One, he's going to let the federal government tell the insurance company what must be in their policies. And number two, he can set their price. So if he wants to, he can make them have product that's uneconomic, drive them out of business, and have government take over. That's frankly where I'm afraid we're headed, which is they'll put all sorts of mandated coverages in the insurance policies, raising the cost to the insurance companies. It'll raise their premiums a lot. There'll be an outrage. Oh, these companies are raising their premiums. We've got to get the government in to keep those costs down. And that's where I think the administration is headed. I can't prove that, but they say this bill is just the first step, and I think that those that are in favor of a single-payer system are planning on taking in that direction. I think those of us who would rather keep a free market system are going to do our best to reverse that course.
It's a subject that will remain in the public eye.
No question.
I'm going to move to something else, but one thing I did want to say is in your discussion of the Massachusetts plan, there were subsidies, there were taxes to try to encourage behavior that could be more optimal. There is a section in the book about the environment and certain fees, certain subsidies as well. And I think, as someone who teaches young people and has children, and of course you have, I think, 14 grandchildren, there is such a concern for the environment. And I think it's very useful to these ideas of using some private market incentives to improve the environment. But now what we're going to do, and you gave me permission, we're going to move to lightning round, where I'm going to throw some things out and just get your reaction. You and your wife Ann have made a lot of hands-on contributions out there physically in the community, in schools that help at-risk children, and they often go on to college. I'm just going to throw something out. Charter schools.
Very good. Working in our state, charter schools are available particularly in minority communities. People who have high incomes are able to choose their school by moving to the town that has the best schools. They also, of course, can send kids to private school. But people who are living in cities and are very low income really can't move from city to city to choose their schools, and the best options they often have are charter schools. That's why I support them. Is that lightning enough?
It's lightning, it's articulate, and even best, I agree with it, sir. Not that it really matters, because you've been head of a state with probably like 100,000 employees, and the dean trusts me with 1/10 of a secretary of my managerial. I share it with 9 other finance secretaries, but I do agree in that case. In the book, you talk about Salt Lake City Olympics, for instance, was right after 9/11, and I think it was hundreds of millions of dollars of security, and it was a secure, successful Olympics. I think I remember, what did they say in Canada? It was about was it $1 billion? No,
I think it was about $1 billion.
About $1 billion,
yeah,
right, for security. Very important question, and you discussed the need for a strong defense. But can terrorists ultimately win?
No, they can cause a great deal of damage, but the terrorist philosophy of authoritarian rule and dictatorial oppression of the people of the world will never succeed, and it will not succeed in the world of Islam, where the great majority of people oppose the radical violent jihadism, which is at the core of many terrorist efforts, and it will not succeed in other parts of the world, whether in Russia or with the tragedy that just occurred there, or here in this country. But there will continue to be terrorist attacks, and we will be subject to brutal and violent attacks, including, in my view, when available, weapons of mass destruction. I saw that I can't remember their exact name, but I believe it's the Committee on Weapons of Mass Destruction and Nuclear Proliferation. It's the follow-on committee to the 9/11 Commission. They said that in their view, that they have a high degree of confidence that there'll be a weapon of mass destruction deployed in a major city sometime within the next 5 years. Not just a U.S. city, some city within the world. Now, that doesn't have to be a nuclear device. It could be a biological device or whatever. But these are real threats. But I believe the people of the world reject these attacks, and by virtue of doing so, I think with time we'll be able to end the horror of radical violent jihadism.
And you discussed the need for greater alliances and a movement in that direction. I think a very inclusive view. What was the most important lesson you learned as a young consultant?
Don't quit your job after 6 months. All right, but your first 6 months in most jobs can be really tough. It's just you probably all had that experience. You think, oh my goodness, what mistake have I made? I got to get out of here. And actually, live through the first 6 months. Put your head down. Work real hard. Number 2, do your present job really well. Perform as superbly as you can, and then just soak up as much learning as you can. And always be looking for opportunities for gaps in the marketplace where there are opportunities to create new innovations of one kind or another. Almost every successful entrepreneur I've seen did not begin by sitting down with a piece of paper and saying, okay, I want to own my own company. What shall I do? Instead, they worked somewhere and they saw a need. They saw a problem that wasn't being met. And they say, you know what? Somebody ought to do something. Aha, I'll do something about that. And so whether you're consulting and you're working with different companies and industries and you see opportunities there, or in the consulting field itself, keep your eyes open for those opportunities, because that is how America succeeds. We do not succeed by having the largest population. We do not succeed by having the lowest cost energy. We succeed by having the most innovative people in the world. This has been the center of opportunity for a couple hundred years. People come here to learn and create and innovate. So finding those opportunities in consulting or in any job you get is what allows America to be so successful.
And that leads right into the next question. Since you were the leader who started Bain Capital and you backed many people who started firms, what kind of person should think about being an entrepreneur? Or the flip side, which of these people should avoid it? It's just not the right thing. You know, there are phone companies, electric utilities, you know.
Yeah. It's really hard for me to tell. I must admit that being an entrepreneur is high risk. Most folks will find that they will not be successful. Most startups fail. So actually going out there and doing it is something that you have to almost have in your DNA. But there are some people who just say, I cannot possibly work for someone else for my entire career. I can't do it. I got to get it. And there'll be people that go out and do that, and they'll be happy making $25,000 a year, but they're doing it on their own. And there are others that say, no, I'd rather work my way up the corporate ladder. You'll be able to tell whether the corporate ladder is the route for you or whether going off and being entrepreneurial is. I had always wanted to be the chief executive of General Motors. I have to be honest. When I got in trouble, I thought maybe Barack Obama will call, but he didn't. He could have gotten me out of his hair, you know that? But anyway, that's what I want. I mean, my summer job, one of my summer jobs, because I was in the 4-year joint program, but one of my summer jobs, I worked at Chrysler Corporation. All right, worked at Chrysler, and it was just deadly. Oh my goodness, it was so bureaucratic. I mean, the line at the parking lot at 5 o'clock, you couldn't move. I mean, it was just getting out of there at 5. It was like, I can't work in an environment like this. But I thought it'd be better, somewhere else in the corporate structure. I went into consulting, thinking it would take me into corporate America, and that I'd be in consulting for 3 or 4 years, then go get a job in a corporation and move up the ladder. But then this opportunity to lead Bain Capital came along, and I jumped at that. It was more entrepreneurial than I ever thought I would experience. I loved it. And I'd never do it a different way, but it's in my own experience is it's very difficult to chart your course. You can't say where I'm going to go. Instead, you do your present job well. You look for the opportunities that exist to help your present employer, and see if there are new things you can do. And you follow your nose, and trying to set out a course and say, I want to get from here to there. I know that there's some, like the 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. Say what your goal is, say it every night. I mean, I didn't do that. I just said I'm gonna work real hard. I like work. I'm gonna give as much as I can to my employer, do well at the job I'm doing, and then as opportunities arise, take advantage of them.
And they say the most successful people are people that just show up and put in an honest day's work every day.
Was that for the benefit of the dean for you? Is that yeah?
The dean will tell you my car is always out there early. Well, what it is, I own 2 cars. I parked one out there with the Yale sticker. And my wife drops me off about 11 o'clock. But, Governor, what is the most important lesson you learned from your father, who, after all, was a highly successful CEO himself, 3-term governor of Michigan, and a great public servant himself, and a great father, as you have 5 successful sons?
Yeah, a lot of lessons that relate to business, but I'm going to answer your question at the end. But I'm going to start with what's not. I mean, he had great sayings. He used to say things like, "There's nothing as vulnerable as entrenched success." And he would explain to me that great corporations that were very, very successful were highly vulnerable. And there were great opportunities to just take over their business because they became complacent and self-satisfied. He said things like, the pursuit of the difficult makes men strong. I'm not sure these were his original lines, or he just quoting somebody else, but he had these things that were very, very helpful, and his level of integrity was such that has always been of the greatest value to me in my business life and in my political life, which is, are you comfortable with who you are, what you believe, and do you express that in the way you deal with others? But the most important thing he taught me was that that the most rewarding part of life is your relationship with your spouse and your family. Family and faith is the most important thing in my life. And the nice thing about your relationship with God and with your family is that serendipity, meaning the luck of what happens in the world, doesn't influence whether you're successful or not. You can have a wonderful relationship with your wife and your kids entirely dependent upon you. And I have to tell you that even if you work really hard and you're really smart, I can't guarantee you that you'll get rich and successful because there's too much luck involved. They're just things that happen that you never would have imagined. They're great corporations people went to work for, worked their way almost to the top, and then somebody invented something that put them out of business, and they're on the street flipping hamburgers. I mean, it's just that's the nature of dealing in a free economy. But one thing that can never be taken away from you is your relationship with the people you love. And I remember asking my dad. My wife and I asked him at age 88. Dad, what was the most meaningful part of your life after serving as a governor, cabinet secretary, CEO of a major corporation? He said, "Oh, no question about it. It's my relationship with your mother and with you kids." So, that's the most important, valuable thing I learned from Dad.
Well, your 40-year marriage is something I know he'd be quite proud of. Many of our students, and at Harvard Business School too, are trying to get jobs in this terrible job market. You have interviewed many people for jobs in the many sectors you've been a leader. What is a key thing you look for and a key turnoff?
That's not fair. Consulting is a really different interview than normal interviews. I mean, most people are looking to match an individual for a position that they want filled. Most enterprises are looking for leaders. They're looking for people who can lead and manage, and so they're learning as they listen to you. They're learning to see whether you have the leadership skills to guide an enterprise of some kind or to guide a small effort of some kind. The person interviewing you, by the way, doesn't want to be made to look foolish if they recommend that you be hired and then you come into the company and you blow out in 6 months. I mean, so they want to find somebody who is not so swell-headed that he or she thinks that unless they're running the company that they're not going to be happy. So they want somebody who will be happy there, who has good leadership skills, management skills, will get along with others, and is reasonably intelligent. In the consulting world, most of that didn't count. Primarily what you're looking for is people who you thought were exceptionally smart. Yeah. And so we would begin interviews with problems and say, I've been trying to think how many mattresses are made a year in the United States. Can you tell me how you would determine the number of mattresses made per year in the United States last year? And then you turn to the person, and then they go through the thing about the population of the U.S. and the average family size, number of family formations per year, the recession level, what that would do, and they calculate it out, and they'd say 152,400, and if they were close to it, it's like, okay, you're hired. Actually, the answer was less important than the process that they went through to get there. Did they think about the various elements, and had they a logical, linear mind? And so consulting, at least at BCG and then at Bain, was highly focused on intelligence and couldn't care less whether the person came in with their shoelaces untied, a hygiene problem of some kind. It didn't make a difference. It's like, and so that I remember. I have to be honest. When I went to law school and business school, I looked around the room at Harvard Law School, and I looked at the students there, and I said, if I had a real tough legal problem, I'd rather hire them than me. And so I'm not going to compete with them by being a lawyer. All right? I think I can do better in business. I think I've got a better skill set for being entrepreneurial or for leading an enterprise, and that's what I'm going to do. So part of this is deciding, who are you? What will you do? What will you do best? And matching your particular brand of skills and intelligence is of a wide variety, with the kind of enterprise you're going to choose.
Just to back up what you were saying, we mentioned Doug Foy, a wonderful leader who you put into your cabinet, and you structured your cabinet to have 3 kind of super cabinet leaders so that this thing would move efficiently, which it did. Doug Foy is in charge of the selection of Marshall Scholars in the Northeast. I'm in charge or chairman for the Southeast. And Marshall Scholars hopefully are people of great intellectual gifts, usually not hygiene. But we used to go to work in government, many of us in academia, et cetera. Now, no matter whether they go to Oxford to study English literature or political science, McKinsey, Bain, and BCG are all over them. We lose about 80% of them straight out of Oxford. So you're right, it's just out there. And in that regard, luckily, our MBAs are that caliber. But there is one thing I would like to end on, and I think you foreshadowed it, but Governor, as we hark back on the introduction and aspects of the book, you're a little bit like a George Shultz or yourself. You've succeeded in so many sectors, in the private sector, in public service, in the government sector. You've led reforms in education as well as healthcare and economic development that have benefited the people of your state. Frankly, you saved the Salt Lake City Olympics, and some people say you saved Bain Consulting. You have a marriage to Anne of over 40 years, 5 children, 14 grandchildren. Governor, what are you most proud of?
Well, I think I did signal that by indicating what my dad taught me. There's no question but that which gives me the greatest joy in my life and I'm most proud of is my relationship with my wife and our kids, our 5 sons, 5 daughters-in-law, 14 grandkids. I mean, that's what gives us the greatest joy. You know, what is it that I think it was Woody Allen said, 90% of history can be explained as a man trying to impress a woman. I mean, a lot of what I do is to try and impress Anne and make her think I'm a pretty good guy. But the truth is, a good part of a healthy relationship with a spouse is leaving home in the morning and going off and doing important work. And whether that's work in the home, I mean, my wife raised the 5 boys at home. Her work there was more important to my happiness than my work, because what she did in raising our kids was what brings me the greatest joy. But we each had our work, and we work hard. Hard work is a big part of an excellent personal relationship. So I wouldn't suggest that my family brought me the most happiness, and therefore we should all sit at home with our kids and play tiddlywinks all day. No, it's a full life of balanced with hard work, with things you enjoy in sport, with faith. If you're a person of faith, with something you believe in very deeply, I think it's extraordinarily powerful in a personal relationship with others to have something you live for that's bigger than yourself. For me, my faith and my country are that. For other people, it may be the Boy Scouts, or it may be a charity of some other kind, or it may be an effort to mentor another person. But there are things that bring meaning and fulfillment to life. And when you have those things as part of your life, then your relationship with your spouse or with others is greatly enhanced. So, living a full life, taking on whatever opportunities arise, and really giving yourself to it is, in my view, a big part of what brings happiness. I will say one thing, which is that I did have some companions that said, I love my wife and family, but right now I'm going to put them to the side, and I'm going to really focus on being successful in business. And they drove themselves, some successfully, some not so. If you put aside your wife and family, it's going to be hard, or your husband and family, depending on your gender, it's going to be hard to come back and pick them back up later. In my view, you never put the most important things aside. You always make that first in your life, and if that comes before job, then that's going to come before job.
That's right. Governor, if I may say in a very nonpartisan way, in this you're quite a role model, and the record speaks for itself. I think you're a very admirable man. I thank you for Romney Care, for how it's helped people that I know, that I knew at MIT, who are schizophrenic and things like that, who have pre-existing conditions and obviously don't have a job. Governor, there's one thing you could do, though, to make me really happy. Could you pick up the bottle of water you never did? I don't know if you know this, Governor, but
I know who makes that water.
Coca-Cola,
Oh, I know who makes it. I don't.
So you don't have to drink it, but could you open it, sir?
Yeah.
Thank you, Governor.
I should tell you. I just have to. Why do I know who makes the Sunny water? Because when we had our Olympics in Salt Lake City, there were actually 3 companies that came to our aid that we could have not had successful Olympics or bailed out our games had it not been for them. And Coca-Cola was one of them. The other one was Budweiser. The third one was General Motors. But no one backed us more than Coca-Cola. So I feel a very warm spot in my heart. So I'll take this as just no. Thank you. Thanks so much.
The preceding program is copyrighted by Emory University.